From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Saddam Hussein's intentions have never changed. He is not developing the missiles for self-defense. These are missiles that Iraq wants in order to project power.
Colin Powell's outstanding today. I mean, it was lockstep. It was so compelling. I don't see how anybody at this point cannot support this effort.
It's the end of the argument phase. America has made its case.
The Powell speech has moved the ball.
I think case is closed.
So wrong for so long. How the press, the pundits, and the president failed on Iraq. As the U.S. death toll in Iraq reaches 4,000, we enter the 6th year of the war. We'll speak with editor and publisher Greg Mitchell. But first, antibiotics, anticonvulsants, painkillers, sex hormones, steroids. No, not in your medicine cabinet. In your water supply? AP conducts a 5-month investigation into America's water. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Iraq, the number of U.S. troops killed has topped 4,000. On Sunday, a homemade bomb killed 4 U.S. troops as they patrolled southern Baghdad. Meanwhile, at least 58 Iraqis died Sunday, including 13 who were killed when the heavily fortified Green Zone was shelled by mortars. The shelling has been described as one of the fiercest and most sustained attacks on the U.S.-controlled zone in the last year. In the northern Iraqi city of Mosul, 12 Iraqi soldiers died when a suicide truck bomber attacked their army garrison. 4 other Iraqi soldiers died in a roadside bomb in the Hameen Mountains. Meanwhile, the Sunday Mirror of London reports the U.S. plans to urge Britain to launch a surge in Basra to combat increasing violence in the southern Iraqi region. Britain handed control of Basra to Iraqi forces in December, but it could now be asked to step up its role again. The former Chilean ambassador to the United Nations has revealed new details on how the Bush administration pressured its allies to support the 2003 invasion of Iraq. According to Geraldo Munoz, the U.S. threatened trade reprisals against friendly countries who withheld their support, spied on its allies, and pressed for the recall of UN envoys that resisted U.S. pressure to endorse the war. Munoz says the diplomatic strategy has generated lasting bitterness and deep mistrust in Washington's relations with allies in Latin America and Europe. Munoz says Bush personally prodded the leaders of 6 nations in the UN Security Council: Angola, Cameroon, Chile, Guinea, Mexico, and Pakistan. When Chile tried to broker a compromise to delay military action, then U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte and then Secretary of State Colin Powell moved quickly to quash the initiative. President Bush has been accused of directly lying to the Iranian people about Iran's nuclear ambitions. In an interview on Thursday, Bush said, quote, "They've declared they want to have a nuclear weapon to destroy people, some in the Middle East." The interview aired on the U.S. government-funded Radio Farda, which broadcasts into Iran in Farsi. Bush's comment directly contradicts the judgments of the National Intelligence Estimate. Several foreign policy analysts accuse Bush of distorting the truth. Joseph Sirchoni of the Plowshares Fund said, quote, "Iran has never said it wanted a nuclear weapon for any reason. It's just not true." Former State Department official Suzanne Maloney said, quote, "The Iranian government is on the record across the board as saying it does not want a nuclear weapon." Meanwhile, the U.S. Treasury Department has called on international financial institutions to steer clear of doing business with almost all Iranian banks. The Financial Times describes the move as the Bush administration's most wide-ranging attempt yet to isolate Tehran financially. In other news from the Middle East, Vice President Dick Cheney has accused Hamas of trying to torpedo peace between the Palestinians and Israel. Cheney's comments came during his visit to Jerusalem. On Sunday, Cheney said, quote, "As we continue to work for peace, we must not and will not ignore the darkening shadows of the situations in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Iran." Cheney vowed to fully support Israel.
America's commitment to Israel's security is enduring and unshakable, as is our commitment to Israel's right to defend itself always against terrorism, rocket attacks, and other threats from forces dedicated to Israel's destruction. The United States will never pressure Israel to take steps that threaten its security.
In campaign news, New Mexico Governor and former presidential candidate Bill Richardson has officially endorsed Senator Barack Obama for president. Richardson's endorsement surprised some since he was a longtime friend to the Clintons and served in 2 senior positions in Bill Clinton's administration. At an Obama campaign rally in Portland, Oregon, Richardson said Obama's candidacy is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our nation.
I think Senator Obama, I decided on this endorsement because I think he's something special that the country needs right now, somebody that can bring the country together. Something very good about this man. And it was just reinforced to do the endorsement by his speech on race, where he could have just said, I'm going to give a safe speech in response to what his pastor had said. But instead, he faced the issue head on and talked about unity and talked about the need to eliminate stereotypes. It just reinforced my decision.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Arlen Specter has called on the Justice Department to investigate the improper breach of confidential passport files of presidential candidates John McCain, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. The State Department has admitted the breach involved contractors from 2 private companies, Stanley Incorporated and the Analysis Corporation, which is known as TAC or TAC. TAC CEO John Brennan is a former CIA agent and is an informal foreign policy advisor to Barack Obama's campaign. China is threatening to smash the protests in Tibet, where up to 100 people have died over the past 2 weeks. An editorial in the People's Daily said opposition to Chinese rule in the Himalayan region must be wiped out. The editorial stated, quote, China must resolutely crush the conspiracy of sabotage and smash Tibet independence forces. The Chinese government recently posted online wanted posters for 21 Tibetan activists. On Friday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the Dalai Lama in India and demanded China come clean on the repression in Tibet.
The situation in Tibet is a challenge to the conscience of the world. It's a challenge to the conscience of the world that I hope that we can help meet. It is a situation where we need to know what is happening there and the world needs to know. And so we come here and say to you, we are with you to meet that challenge. We thank you for the inspiration that you are to the world, and thank you for the courage that you give us to join you in this.
The World Food Program has launched an extraordinary emergency appeal to raise at least $500 million in the next 4 weeks. In a letter to donor nations, the UN agency said food aid would have to be rationed off if the new funds are not received by May 1st. The World Food Program said its funding gap is largely caused by soaring food prices as well as record-high oil prices. The governor of Kansas, Kathleen Sebelius, has vetoed a measure to allow for the construction of 2 new coal-fired power plants. The plants would have produced up to 11 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. The New York Times reports new government research has found large and growing disparities in life expectancy for richer and poorer Americans, paralleling the growth of income inequality in the last 2 decades. There's now a 4.5-year gap in the life expectancy between the country's most affluent and most deprived. In the early 80s, the gap was less than 3 years. The gap between poor African American men and affluent white women is now more than 14 years. In media news, the business publication Crain's reports Rupert Murdoch wants to buy a 3rd daily newspaper in New York, the Long Island-based Newsday. Murdoch's News Corp already owns the New York Post, Wall Street Journal, and 2 major TV stations in New York. Newsday is currently owned by the Tribune Company. A federal district court has ruled the National Park Service violated the First Amendment rights of anti-war protesters when it excluded them from a major section of President Bush's 2005 inaugural parade route. The decision came in a lawsuit brought by the Answer Coalition. In Belgium, police arrested nearly 500 demonstrators Saturday at a peace demonstration outside the NATO headquarters in Brussels. The protest came just days after the 5th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Protest organizers accused NATO of being an instrument of U.S. policy in Iraq